Well, good evening, and I'm really thrilled to be here tonight. It is such a pleasure, and I've had a chance to talk to many of you. I know you, and I want to say congratulations on launching this wonderful organization, Green Card Voices. I think it is absolutely the right organization at this time to bring people together with different backgrounds from all over the world, because we live in a global world. Well, I think that I started to share my story, but let me just tell you that it's a classic immigrant tale. And it's not unfamiliar to many of you. And it's a story about my grandparents, where my grandparents were born in Mexico, all four of them. My maternal grandparents crossed over when they were children and lived in Texas, got married, had my mother, and they decided that they wanted a different life. And so for some reason, they got a hold of information that said that, there's work in Minnesota. They came up through the migrant stream and they worked in the fields for a year. And then I can tell you that the women in my family in particular said, this is not the kind of life that we want for our family. And so they settled out in Minneapolis in 1924. And we have been here ever since. And I used to tell the Hennepin County Board, I used to work for 7 electeds, which gave you a tenure of about 10 minutes, because if you got 4 votes against you, you were out of the 24th floor window, and that was the end of you. But I used to tell them that I had relatives all over Hennepin County, so they needed to watch out. I don't know if my relatives would have voted for me or not. Anyway, and so today I stand before you as the granddaughter of those migrant workers, which is an amazing story, because for people who were as poor and as humble as my relatives were, I know that my grandmother was a maid most of her life, but she told me a couple of things, and one thing she told me is, don't ever let anyone treat you like a second-class citizen. And take care of yourself, take care of your family, take care of your community. Not in so many words, not in those words, but basically that's the message that she gave us. I have to also say that I've had wonderful opportunity and wonderful support from my family. It's very funny, as we were talking earlier this week, I was telling Aida that, there's kind of a stereotype about Latinos, Latinas, and it's like, where we talk about Latino men being very macho and Latina women kind of hopping to it. And it's like, that was not the life we lived in my family, I will tell you. It was not. My grandmother ruled everything, and you didn't want to cross her, and you did what she said. So I have to tell you, the women in my family, and my mother is going to be 91 years old this June. She is still the head of the family. She still travels to Minnesota. We take her out of the Texas heat, and she comes here for a couple of months, and people who don't live with their families very closely say, oh my God, how can you stand living with your mother for 2 months in your house? I said, I love it. I absolutely love it. But that is the Latino way, isn't it? Well, I'm here tonight, and we're all here tonight, because we want to celebrate the green card stories. And I think that my story shows that immigrants have a long history of making contributions to the state and are key to the diverse and thriving economy we have enjoyed in Minnesota for so many years. Immigrants have brought a wealth of experiences, skills, and talents, impacting all aspects of our society. From green card to red carpet, Minneapolis resident Vargas Abdi was driving limos and making music videos before landing a role alongside Tom Hanks in Captain Phillips. I hope you saw him at the Oscars. Vargas had come a long way from his taxi route and is now shopping for his next role on the big screen. That is the American story. And I'm sure many of you have spotted Catalla or Catalia and Sunny Fresh tortillas in your local grocery store. This local company sells tortillas across the US and Canada. It generates about $25 million annually and employs over 100 people who make more than 2 million tortillas a day. Wow. Catalia Mexican Foods began as a small local family operation. It was the Cruz family, and I remember meeting them. And it was a mom and a dad and their children, and they were importing tortillas from Chicago. And then, as that company grew and got bigger, it was sold to another public company. And now if you go out to Egan, you can see Catalia, which is an unbelievable, heavily innovative tortilla-making company run by Kathy Cruz Gooch. That is the American story. And I have to tell you, and Mia, my friend Yvonne Chung Ho, put that deal together. And it's a deal between a minority family, a minority company, and Cargill. And the minority family is the major shareholder in that company. While these stories are powerful, the facts around immigration also tell a compelling story. Immigrants are key to our state's economic success. And I want you to consider this. Throughout Minnesota, immigrant-owned businesses generated $331 million in net income in just 1 year. That was a few years ago. I'm sure it's much more now. Nationally, immigrants are almost twice as likely as native-born Americans to start a business, and our community desperately needs more entrepreneurs in order to create more jobs. We need those entrepreneurs. And immigrants can be credited with turning around decaying neighborhoods and replacing crime with jobs. Take a minute to remember Minneapolis before immigrant-owned businesses opened the doors on Franklin Avenue, Lake Street, and Nicollet Avenue over the last 2 decades. New immigrant businesses in Worthington, Wilmer, and other outstate cities have also helped those rural communities reverse economic declines. And with agriculture being a leading economic driver in many rural areas, immigrants are absolutely critical. And I don't know if you know this, but immigrant workers fill the farm jobs that industry desperately needs to remain competitive. Between 2007 and 2009, 71% of agribusiness workers were foreign-born. 71%. So that means if we don't have immigrants streaming into Minnesota, our agribusiness really goes down. I don't have to tell this group at the high end, you know what skilled immigrants are doing for corporations. You can talk to Mike Fernandez from Cargill, and he'll tell you that we need immigrants to be food scientists. You could talk to Ecolab, you can talk to 3M, you can talk to Medtronic, who has an immigrant at the top of its, has an immigrant as its CEO. And again, that is a huge contribution to this country and to this state. As you know from my introduction, I have the privilege of leading the Minneapolis Foundation, which helps generous Minnesotans support the causes they care about most. I like to say that we're in the business of philanthropy. We do this by connecting charitable resources, ideas, and people to make a positive impact in our community. And ultimately, we help people's giving go further. And I want to tell you, this community, and we're sitting here in a POLAD organization, the POLADs are one of the most generous families on the face of the earth. And I just want to say thank you to them. I also want to say thank you to all of the other generous families. We just received an anonymous $50 million gift at the Minneapolis Foundation, and we are very, very grateful for the generosity of the people of this community. And we also believe at the Minneapolis Foundation that when each of us does better, we all do better. We can't ever forget that we are connected to each other. So I want to talk a little bit now about the fact that not everyone fares as well in our community today. As I look at you, you are a very successful group. You have great things that you've accomplished. You've got a great future in front of you. But I will tell you that, in fact, we have some serious disparities in our immigrant community. While our economy relies heavily on the work of immigrants, these individuals struggle to find jobs that pay a living wage. According to a report that we called One Minneapolis, Minneapolis families headed by one or two foreign-born parents are twice as likely to live in poverty as those headed by a US-born parent, even though many of these families work more than 2 jobs. Immigrants are industrious and they are hard workers, but still we have many, many immigrant families in poverty. Poverty, and it's interesting because if you look at the Latino community, if you look at Mexicans coming into our community, you know, they're healthy as they come in, and when they start eating our food or eating like we do, their health goes down the tube. So poverty is associated with poor physical and mental health, housing instability, and a host of other negative outcomes for parents and children. And these are especially hard resources to access if you are an undocumented person in this community. Our immigrant youth are also continue to experience gross disparities in the education system, and I wish I could speak to you for hours on the education system. I won't, but I will tell you that only 36% of Spanish-speaking kindergartners are ready for school. And in terms of the larger dominant culture community, you've got kids ready at the 80 and 90 percentile factor. Only 40% of Hmong immigrants are proficient in 3rd grade reading. And we can talk about the Asian community because they've got a lot of academic achievement under their belt, but when you talk about the Hmong community, that is a different community, and so they struggle in poverty like many others. Only 41% of African immigrants graduate from high school on time, 41%. And our state has the nation's lowest high school graduation rates in the nation for Latino students, the lowest. I also want to say that there are some bright spots because I don't want to leave you with that kind of really downward trend. We have a couple of charter operations. We're working hard on education, and I'd love to talk to you all about that at some other time. But I can tell you that Amber Hansen, who is here in this group tonight, works for a group called Hiawatha Leadership Academies, and it has about 80% of its kids are from very poor Spanish-speaking homes, and they are one of the best public schools in the state. And I can tell you that Amber and the whole team over at Hiawatha Leadership Academy wrap themselves around the parents, they wrap themselves around the kids, and the kids are really kicking it out of the ballpark because of that. We have to change education. The same way with the African and African American community on the north side, where we have Harvest Prep right on Olson Highway. You probably drive by that at some time or another. 1,200 kids, African American, from the same poor neighborhoods, one of the best charter operations, some of the best public schools in the state. So here's what I want to tell you. Just because you're poor doesn't mean that you can't have a great education. So remember that, because I'll bring that up again. But I want to go back to the fact that if we don't improve the numbers of immigrants and people in poverty in our state, Minnesota will face a crisis. We will not have, and this is something that we really pride ourselves in, we will not have the kind of educated workforce that Minnesota has become known for all over the country. We need the next generation of new Americans to fully participate in our workforce if we want to compete in the global economy. But we can't do that if we allow another generation of immigrant youth to fall prey to the achievement gap. What accounts for these disparities is not a lack of resources. I can tell you, I just gave a little speech in front of my colleagues at community foundations in Texas, and we spend about $11,000 per kid in Minnesota, and we still have those achievement gaps. There's something going on. I will tell you that we have a lack of will to change the system and to make it a more successful system for immigrant kids and poor kids. These facts are especially important as we consider the demographics change happening in our community. I can tell you that last fall, we brought a demographer from Chapel Hill, North Carolina State, by the name of Jim Johnson. And he will give you a picture of the United States over the next couple of decades that will blow your mind. Obviously, it's happening in California, it's happening in the Southwest. It will come to Minnesota. So if we do not educate our children of color, in particular our immigrant children, we will not have the kind of economic engine that this community, this region has really counted on. So let me just talk a little bit more about some statistics. Demographic projections show that the state's labor force, which surged 27% in the last 20 years, will grow less than 6% in the next 20 years. A Twin Cities Business Monthly article by reporter Dave Beal said, "These projections are a powerful sign that demographics are destiny." And again, if we have more immigrants coming into our community, that's great. But if we do not educate the children and give them the resources to thrive, that will take us down. A destiny of worker shortages will not be good for our regional economy. Signs of worker shortages in critical fields are already surfacing, most notably in management, office work, sales, production, agriculture, and education. Positions currently held by baby boomers, moi, and the very people who move closer to retirement each day. Given this scenario, immigrants are of growing importance to Minnesota's economy. More than 1 in 6 Minnesotans under the age of 19 are the children of immigrants. We need to make sure these young people have the skills and opportunities needed to support themselves, their families, and the community, because they are our future. During my time as the Hennepin County Administrator, and again, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience for me, and it was totally political. I learned a lot. I focused on creating a long-term vision of well-being and prosperity for the county and its residents. But it was also an eye-opening experience to work with families that had experienced generational poverty, escaped civil war, political persecution, and endured a range of other experiences. We noticed that many people who need assistance often don't know or don't understand how to get resources. Access continues to prevent people from getting health, education, employment, and other services. And we relied heavily on partnerships with the immigrant communities to get the work done. And that's wonderful. That's a real asset for immigrant communities to figure out how do we use the social capital that exists in immigrant communities so that people help themselves. But it's not enough to partner with communities. We need to support civic leadership opportunities within immigrant communities so that individuals can address the issues impacting their lives. I was so proud to see members of the Latino, Hmong, and Somali community get elected to the Minneapolis City Council. That is a huge move in the right direction. We need more immigrant voices shaping policies on local commissions and boards and elected offices. We must have immigrants exercise their voice and their vote. I've always felt that diversity is one of the greatest assets we have. And it helps us attract the talent that we need to keep our community prosperous. Whether it's on the big screen, in our grocery stores, or in our health system throughout the community, immigrants bring a tremendous wealth to our community and are a critical part of our success. So there are 2 issues I want to leave you with because I'm going to close now. And I want you to really think about this because I think a lot of us get really cynical about politics. But public policy is so very important. And I have to tell you, it makes a difference. Maybe not directly for you or your families if you can afford to send your children to the best schools. But I will tell you that there are families out there struggling right now. Families where English is not an easy language to speak, and we're sticking their kids in classrooms that are not very good for them. So, the first issue I want to tell you is that Carlos Mariani, who is a representative, state representative, and Senator Patricia Torres Rey are introducing a bill tomorrow morning called LEAP, and I'm trying to see if I can actually give you the acronym, and it looks like I probably can't find that. But let me just tell you, that it is going to focus on making sure that immigrant kids, which is the highest growing number of students in our state, get the kind of attention and talent that they need in order to do well in school. That achievement gap starts very, very early, and if we can't give them the kind of resources that they need in order to gain the language skills, and then after that all of the other skills, we're in real trouble. So again, I want you to look for a LEAP bill, and please keep following it. If you can give some support, and I'm talking about just giving them a kudo or writing them an email to Carlos and to Patricia, that would be a very good thing to do. Because right now they are facing the whole rest of the legislature, possibly without a lot of support. So we need this community to say, yes, we are a global community. We need more than one language, and we need to really make sure that our kids are proficient both in English and the language that they come to our country with. The second thing is, and this is really important, and it's not up yet, you've all heard the debate on the whole issue of comprehensive immigration reform. For those of you in this room, it's probably not an issue. It wasn't an issue for me, but I can tell you there are thousands and thousands of people who are suffering right now. They live in the shadows. They also get deported in huge numbers, and their families are breaking up because moms and dads are being sent back to the country that they came from. The kids are probably mostly American, or at least the little kids are, the younger kids. And so one of the things that I ask you, we are in a global community, we have a broken immigration system, so if you get a chance to talk to your congressional leader, please let them know that this is something totally important to those of us in this room that have been there with grandparents that may have had a green card, but had some access in this country, and now we need to make sure that all of us will do better as we're connected to those that don't have as much access. Thank you so much for inviting me tonight, and I really, really wish you the best of luck.